Night had swallowed the Roman marketplace whole. Not the gentle kind of night that carried whispers or secrets, but the heavy, merciless kind that pressed down on the world like a judgment. Rain hammered the stone columns with the force of thrown spears. It poured off tiled roofs in violent sheets, cutting through the darkness like silver blades. The torches that lined the long-abandoned stalls fought desperately to stay alive, trembling against the wind, crackling like frightened breaths trying not to be snuffed out. Every sound felt louder in a place meant for crowds. The slap of storm water against marble. The low groan of wooden auction blocks swelling beneath the rain. The distant creak of iron chains shifting on hooks. The marketplace stood empty, yet it carried the ghost of every voice that had ever filled it. The traders, the gamblers, the executioners, the curious onlookers who treated suffering like a spectacle. And beneath all of that memory, tonight, there was something new, the raw, electric tension of a life running out of places to hide. She surged up from the underground pit beneath the auction platform, barefoot, blood-soaked, and breathing as if every breath cut her open from the inside. Her wrists still bore the deep impressions of the shackles she had broken moments before, her skin torn and wet with fresh streaks of red that mixed with rain and dirt. Her hair clung to her face, plastered down by stormwater and sweat. She dragged herself forward, slipping on the slick stone as she fought to climb out of the darkness she had been thrown into. She emerged into the night like something half-born, half-exiled. A young woman, no more than 17 summers, yet carrying the weight of someone who had lived a lifetime of chained days. Her lungs burned. Her throat tasted of blood and fear. But her legs, weak, trembling, near collapse, still obeyed her. She ran. She didn't look back, not even once. If she did, she knew she would freeze. Not from fear, but from the crushing weight of what she had escaped. And what still hunted her. The narrow alleys between the merchant stalls twisted in tight, claustrophobic lines. Empty baskets rolled across her path, tossed around by the wind. The fabric of abandoned canopies snapped violently overhead like whips. Every corner felt sharp, every shadow full of danger. As she darted through the maze of darkened paths, she could hear the guards spilling out from the pit behind her, the clash of metal boots on stone, the bark of orders, the dogs snarling as they caught her scent. Her pulse pounded so hard it felt like a fist inside her chest. A relentless drum. A warning. A countdown. The storm didn't give her mercy. It drenched her skin in a cold that bit deep, turning every scrape into a sting and every bruise into an ache. Her feet, already cut from the rough stone inside the pit, left thin trails of diluted red across the marketplace floor. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, but she no longer cared. Pain was an old friend. It didn't slow her anymore. What scared her, what truly frightened her, was the heat blooming beneath her skin. It started in her palms first, a subtle burn like touching heated metal for too long. Then it crept up her arms, under her ribs, along her throat. It wasn't fire, not yet. It was something worse, something alive. Something waiting. Something she had spent years trying to bury because she had learned the hard way what happened when it slipped free. The silver shimmer. The thing they had beaten her for. The thing they had locked her underground for. The thing the priests had called a curse and the soldiers had called a threat. The thing that made her worth money to the wrong kind of man and worth killing to the wrong kind of gods. She felt it again now, rushing toward the surface like a wave breaking through the cracks in a dam. Her fingers trembled. Light flickered faintly beneath her skin, just enough to cast a glow in the darkness around her. She clenched her hands into fists and pressed them against her stomach, willing the power to stay down. Not now. Not here. Not when the wrong eyes could see it. If she let it out, even for a heartbeat, they would slaughter her. And they would call it mercy. Thunder exploded overhead, so loud it shook dust loose from the wooden beams above the stalls. The sky cracked open with a jagged streak of lightning, bathing the marketplace in sharp, violent white light. And in that split second of illumination, her own hands betrayed her, gleaming faintly with an otherworldly silver sheen. She gasped and yanked them close to her chest, hiding them beneath the torn fabric of her dress. Tears pricked her eyes, not from the rain or the cold, but from the fear she had carried for so long it felt carved into her bones. Desperation clung to her like a second skin. Shame tightened her throat. But beneath all of that, something else pushed back. Defiance. She didn't want to die in chains. She didn't want to be buried under a marketplace floor, forgotten like every other cursed soul the Empire didn't understand. She wanted to breathe something other than damp stone. She wanted to feel something other than fear. She didn't know what she wanted. Maybe freedom. Maybe a chance. Maybe a single person in this enormous, unforgiving world to look at her and not see a monster. Rain blurred her vision as she rounded another corner, slipping on the slick stone and catching herself on a vendor's overturned crate. She pushed forward, wind slicing at her skin, breath stuttering in her chest. Every muscle screamed for her to stop. But stopping meant being dragged back underground. Stopping meant the collar. The brand. The auction block. The rope. Stopping meant endless darkness. So she kept running. The guard's shouts grew closer. One of them yelled her criminal designation, like she was a numbered object, not a living, breathing girl. Another ordered someone to bring the iron muzzle. A third laughed, saying she wouldn't get far with feet that torn. Their voices lifted over the storm, each one a reminder of what waited if she stumbled. She darted down another alley. Then another. Her body moved on instinct, driven by terror and an exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. Her breath came in fast, uneven pulls. Her hair whipped across her face. Her vision blurred at the edges. The marketplace twisted in loops that made no logical sense, rows of stalls that felt endless, pillars that all looked the same, shadows that swallowed direction. The rain made every corner identical. The darkness made every path feel wrong. But she didn't stop. Every part of her fought to keep going. Even when her legs buckled. Even when the lightning blinded her. Even when the heat beneath her skin pulsed again, urging her to release the silver flame locked inside her chest. She whispered to herself in a voice cracked from fear and cold. Not yet. Hold on. Hold it together. For one moment longer. One breath longer. One heartbeat longer. Because somewhere deep inside her, buried under years of humiliation, pain, and whispers of cursed blood, there was a tiny ember of hope. Faint, but alive. And that ember whispered, over and over. Run. You're not done yet. She stumbled again, nearly collapsing. The storm roared like the sky itself wanted her dragged back underground. Lightning struck so close she felt the heat on her skin. Thunder rolled right through her ribs. The marketplace felt alive, a creature watching her flee across its stone spine. She tried to swallow her fear, but it rose like drowning water. Her entire body shook. Her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. She didn't know who she was running toward. Only who she was running from. And in the back of her mind, somewhere fragile, somewhere quiet, she prayed. Not to the Roman gods. Not to the priest who branded her cursed. Not to the men who promised salvation if she just obeyed. She prayed to anyone still listening. Anyone who cared about stories like hers, stories of broken girls who refused to stay broken. She prayed that whoever heard her wouldn't leave her alone again. If they wanted to follow her struggle, they should stay close. Stay with her. Stay alive with her. Stay long enough to see whether she burns or survives. And if they believed she deserved more than chains and fear, they should remember her name. Hold on to her voice. Come back for the next heartbeat of her journey. Because her survival depended on one thing, someone, somewhere believing she was more than a curse. She didn't hear him at first. The storm was too loud, the guards too close, her own heartbeat too wild. But something shifted in the air. Something subtle, almost imperceptible, like the world drawing in a sharp breath. A stillness spread through the chaos as if the rain itself paused to listen. And then she felt him. Before she saw anything, before she understood anything, a heat, not her own, moved across the back of her neck. It wasn't the burning silver beneath her skin. It was something external. Something watching. Something aware. She stiffened, terrified that her power had finally drawn the wrong kind of attention. She skidded to a stop at the mouth of a narrow alley, bracing herself against a pillar as her legs threatened to fold beneath her. Her breath came in harsh, uneven pulls. She turned, slowly, reluctantly, as if something far older than fear compelled her to look. At first, he was only a silhouette, a tall figure standing at the far edge of the deserted marketplace. Cloaked in wolf fur armor, motionless, he could have been a statue carved from obsidian. The rain slid off him as though it dared not touch him. The torches flickered wildly around him yet never seemed to break his shadow. And then he moved. Just a single step forward. But it struck her like the ground shifting under her feet. The lightning flashed again, tearing open the sky, and the light caught his eyes, gold. Not yellow. Not amber. Gold. The kind of gold that held warmth at one moment and danger at the next. Predator's eyes. Knowing eyes. Eyes that saw too much. He didn't blur into view. He didn't stalk or charge. He simply stepped forward, calm and deliberate, as though summoned by her heartbeat. The storm raged. The guards shouted. But he walked toward her like none of it mattered. She stumbled backward instinctively, hands raised, breath shaking. She expected a guard. Or a buyer. Or the kind of man who saw chained criminals as property. But this man did not wear Roman armor. His clothing marked him as a foreigner. Wolf fur bindings over his shoulders, leather bracers carved with runic marks, a blade strapped to his back that was too curved, too dark, too ancient for Roman smiths to have shaped. He didn't move like a soldier. He didn't move like a man meant for crowds at all. He moved like something that belonged to the wild. Another step forward. Slow. Controlled. Her pulse tripped over itself in confusion. She prepared to run, even though her legs trembled violently. She prepared to fight, even though she knew it would barely last seconds. Her hands twitched toward her chest, silver heat threatening to push outward again. But then he did something she never expected. He spoke. Not the title they branded her with. Not the number they assigned her. Not the curse they carved into her skin. He said her name. Her real name. The one she hadn't heard in years. The one they beat out of her. The one she buried so deep she sometimes feared she'd imagined it. His voice cut through the storm with steady certainty, deep, quiet, and carrying an unfamiliar accent that softened the hard edges of the syllables. She froze. Every instinct inside her screamed to flee, but her body refused to obey. Hearing her name spoken aloud felt like a hand pulling her back into a life she thought had been crushed out of existence. She swallowed hard, throat burning, mind racing. No one here knew that name. No one alive should have known that name. He stopped a few paces away, not close enough to threaten her, not far enough to be harmless. He didn't reach for her. Didn't try to grab or cage or control. He simply stood there, letting the rain soak into the dark fur draped over his shoulders, watching her with patient intensity. As if he were waiting for her to breathe. Lightning flashed again, and the gold in his eyes shifted. Not anger. Not greed. Something far more complicated. Something that made her chest tighten in a way that frightened her more than the guards did. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. How do you know that name? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her, not the way men studied bodies, but the way predators studied storms, wary, calculating, respectful of the danger. I have been searching for you, he said at last. His voice remained calm, but something raw pulsed beneath it. Something he was fighting to keep contained. Since the first rumor spread. Since they whispered of a silver-blooded girl condemned to chains. Her breath caught. Silver-blooded. The forbidden power she couldn't control. The thing that made her valuable and dangerous all at once. He stepped closer, but only a fraction of a step, watching her reaction carefully. His restraint wasn't forced, it was deliberate. He was holding himself back, as if approaching her too quickly would ignite something neither of them could extinguish. They described you, he continued, but words were small. Too small for what you are. She shook her head, stumbling backward again. I don't know you. I don't trust. Her voice died in her throat as lightning illuminated his face fully for the first time. Sharp jaw. Wolf-bone pendant at his throat. A scar that cut across his eyebrow, healed in a way only a shifter's flesh could mend. Eyes that held wildness behind restraint. Something deep inside her, a place she didn't understand, a place tied to the silver heat in her blood, reacted to him instantly. Not attraction. Not safety. Something deeper. Something impossible. A pull. As if the air between them tightened. As if the rain bent around him. As if the world had been waiting for this moment, and now that it had arrived, it refused to let her turn away. I don't want trouble, she whispered, voice trembling. I just need to get away. Yes, he replied. And they are coming. The guard's shouts cut through the marketplace, closer now, echoing between stone columns. The dogs barked, their claws clicking against the wet stone as they tracked her scent. She turned toward the sound, panic slamming back into her chest like a hammer. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know why he wanted her. She didn't know whether he meant to save her or use her. But she knew one thing, she could not be caught again. She attempted to run, but her legs buckled from exhaustion. She caught herself on the pillar, nails scraping the stone. Her whole body shook from cold and fear. The silver heat flared under her skin again, threatening to surge outward in a burst that would expose her completely. He didn't touch her. He didn't grab her arm. He didn't force her to move. He simply stepped between her and the direction of the guards, not shielding her like a hero, but positioning himself like someone who had already chosen a side. Her side. The gold in his eyes flickered brighter, not from the lightning, but from something inside him reacting to danger. He didn't look at her when he spoke next. Stay behind me. She almost laughed, weak and disbelieving. Why would I stay behind someone I don't even? Something shifted inside him. A tension. A struggle. A barely contained instinct rising beneath the surface of his human disguise. His shoulders tightened. His jaw clenched. The rain hit his skin and hissed faintly, as if meeting heat. And beneath the wolf fur cloak, something moved, a ripple of muscle, of power, of transformation held at bay by sheer will. He wasn't just a man. He wasn't just a foreigner. He was something else. Her pulse jumped in her throat. He finally turned his head slightly, and his voice came out lower, rougher, edged with something primal. Because you are not meant to face them alone. Before she could answer, before she could challenge or question or demand anything, the first guard burst into the open space of the marketplace, sword raised. And the man in wolf fur armor moved. He moved like a blade cutting through time. Not fast in a way she could follow. Fast in a way that made the world seem slow. One breath. One blink. Steel flashed. The guard sword clattered to the stone floor, spinning in a wide arc before skidding into a puddle. The guard himself hit the ground a second later, disarmed without understanding how it happened. The dogs lunged. He pivoted, caught the first by the collar, and flung it aside with a controlled force that sent it sliding harmlessly across the wet stone. The second dog leaped, jaws wide, but he sidestepped and struck its flank with the hilt of his blade, knocking it out cold. More guards tore through the shadows, shouting orders, "Take the girl. Hold her down. Don't let her use the power." She braced for the worst. But he stood firm, body tense, eyes burning bright. And then she saw it. The glow beneath his skin. Not silver like hers. Gold. wild, ancient, alpha-born power thrumming just beneath the surface, threatening to break free. He kept one hand on his blade. The other curled into a fist at his side, claws threatening to break through skin. He was fighting something inside himself with every breath. And he was fighting for her. She pressed a trembling hand to her own chest, overwhelmed by the realization that terrified her more than the guards, more than the storm, more than the curse etched into her blood. She didn't want him to stop. Not because she trusted him. Not because she believed him. But because something in her, something old, something instinctive, recognized him. The world seemed to narrow around them, shrinking until there were only three things left. The storm. The danger. And the connection neither of them asked for. The guards charged. He didn't hesitate. He moved with inhuman speed, a blur of gold-lit fury cutting through the rain. Metal rang against stone as blades flew. Chains shattered under the force of his strikes. Every motion he made was controlled violence, deadly, efficient, but never reckless. And through the chaos, his voice reached her again. "Run when I tell you." She didn't argue. She didn't resist. For the first time in years, she let herself believe, just a fraction, just a breath, that someone might be fighting for her, not against her. With a final strike, he knocked the last guard to the ground. The rain fell heavy and hot around him, turning the marketplace into a stormlit battlefield. Then he turned toward her. Gold eyes burning. Chest rising with slow, controlled breaths. Power thrumming at the edges of his restraint. The world felt suspended. He extended his hand, not to grab her. Not to command her. To offer her a choice. Come. The ground trembled beneath them as if the world shifted with that single word. And nothing would ever be the same. The rain had softened to a steady whisper by the time they slipped through the back passages of the abandoned Roman quarter, but the girl still felt as if the world was striking her with every droplet. Her breath trembled as she followed the stranger, the Alpha, through narrow stone alleys that smelled of wet dust and old blood. His steps were silent, impossibly controlled, as if he had memorized the rhythm of the earth beneath him. She hated that she matched her pace to his, hated that her body responded to the steadiness he offered when her entire life had been nothing but trembling edges. The torches sputtered along the empty streets, their dying flame slicing gold across his wolf fur mantle. He didn't look back at her, but she felt him tracking every sound she made. The way her breath caught. The way her bare feet slapped the stone. The way her pulse skipped whenever the wind brushed against her cracked skin. He heard it all. She was sure of it. And that awareness, his awareness of her, dragged her back into memories she wished she could bury. It started with the smell of smoke. Not the clean burn of torches, but the thick, choking smoke of a village gathered in judgment. She could almost hear their voices rising again, echoing off the walls around her. Calling her cursed, marked, unnatural. She tasted the same metallic fear that had coated her tongue the night the elders dragged her to the center of the square. 12 years old. Barefoot. Terrified. She remembered gripping her mother's skirt, begging silently for her to say something, anything, but her mother only stared at the ground, refusing to meet her eyes. That night had shaped her more than any beating, any chain, any bruise. That night was the first time her power broke through. She saw flashes now, the priest in his heavy linen robe raising a hand, his voice condemning her as a child of wolf demons. His words weighed more than law. In their world, his fear became fact. She remembered her ribs shaking as the villagers stepped back, whispering prayers while staring as though she were already half-shifted into a monster. And then the pain hit. A heat so bright it felt like her bones were melting. The silver flame bursting under her skin without warning, without mercy, without control. She remembered screaming. She remembered the ground cracking. She remembered the look of horror on her father's face as he shielded the other children from her light. She remembered thinking she had killed someone. Maybe she did. No one ever told her the truth. The memory clawed up her throat like a sob. Her steps faltered. The alpha noticed instantly. He slowed, but didn't touch her. His restraint struck her harder than any grab might have. Roman guards seized her without hesitation. Traders grabbed her like she was merchandise. Men had dragged her by the hair, by the throat, by whatever part of her they could hold. But he, this stranger, didn't lay a single finger on her. She wondered if that made him more dangerous or less. The alley narrowed, walls rising like cliffs on either side. She stared at his back, at the way his shoulders held a tension not aimed at her but at everything around them. He wasn't just leading her, he was shielding her. But why? She didn't trust kindness. Kindness had always been a trap. A promise followed by pain. A sweet word followed by chains. Her heartbeat rattled like pebbles under a boot. He glanced over his shoulder then, just once. Not to reassure her. Not to demand anything. Just to look. And the moment their eyes met, something in her chest lurched painfully, the way a wound pulses when touched. His gaze didn't carry fear. Or disgust. Or morbid curiosity. It held recognition. Recognition she didn't understand. Recognition she didn't want. She tore her gaze away and looked up at the dark windows of the silent buildings instead. These streets had once been alive with merchants shouting prices, with people bartering for spices and fabrics, with Senate messengers rushing through the crowds. Now they were empty. Hollow. Haunted. She felt strangely connected to them, structures abandoned by the world, still standing but carrying more scars than they showed. Her ankle twisted slightly on the uneven stones. Pain shot up her leg, but she forced herself upright. She didn't want him to see weakness. She didn't want anyone to see weakness ever again. Weakness had been used against her since the first time she cried in public. Weakness had been the reason she was dragged from her home, why she was thrown into the underground pits, why she was auctioned like an animal with a curse carved into her skin. He paused ahead, listening. Waves of distant shouts drifted through the wind, guards searching for her, calling out descriptions that felt more like accusations. The cursed girl. The silver-marked slave. The demon child. Each word sliced deeper than the last. Her breath hitched. He turned his head slightly, sensing her reaction. For a long moment, they stood in the rain-washed stillness. She wished she could hide her shaking hands, but there was no way. The faint silver glow beneath her skin pulsed again, betraying her. She curled her fingers into fists, willing the power down, burying it deep where it couldn't hurt anyone, where it couldn't make her a monster again. But he watched the light flare, and didn't flinch. Her throat tightened painfully. No one had ever seen her like that, glowing, trembling, unraveling, and met it with silence instead of fear. No one. Not even her parents. He finally spoke, voice low, almost reluctant, as if he knew each word would shift something inside her. You don't have to hide that from me. The rain muffled everything but her heartbeat. She wanted to spit back that she wasn't hiding anything, that he didn't know her, that he didn't get to speak to her like he understood. But the truth was lodged too deep. She had been hiding every day of her life, and he had seen it in an instant. She swallowed hard. Then the flashbacks surged again, as though the wind itself was pulling them out of her. She saw the chains they used to drag her from village to village. Heavy iron cuffs biting at her wrists. Merchants shouting prices based on the rumors of her power. Children shrinking away when they passed her cage. She remembered wondering if she should let the silver flame burn her alive just to stop the spectacle. She remembered the nights curled on the cold ground, whispering to herself that she didn't ask to be born like this, didn't ask to be dangerous, didn't ask to be feared. And she remembered the last auction, the one she'd escaped mere moments ago. The crowd jeering. The whip cracking. The Roman herald raising his voice to announce the rare cursed specimen. She remembered tasting blood in her mouth as she bit down on a scream, determined not to give them any satisfaction. Determined not to break. But she had broken. Just not in the way they expected. She broke when she heard them negotiating prices. As if she were grain. Or cattle. Or a weapon. And then the Alpha appeared. The memory of his first words to her pressed against her ribs. He had spoken her true name. A name she had not heard since childhood. A name the world tried to erase. The moment he said it, something inside her shifted violently, like a locked door blown open by force. She didn't trust it. She didn't trust him. But she couldn't deny the truth stirring in her bones. He didn't look at her like a curse. He looked at her like someone who recognized the pieces of her she had been forced to bury. Her mind spiraled with questions. Why was he here? How did he know her name? How long had he been watching her? What did he want from her? Was he like the priests who claimed to help her but only sought to contain her? Was he another traitor looking for profit? Or was he something else entirely, something just as dangerous but in a different way? Before she could stop herself, she studied him more closely. The wolf fur mantle. The gold eyes. The steady breath. The posture of a man who carried a history of violence but didn't let it rule him. He didn't move like a Roman soldier. He didn't speak like a merchant. He didn't look like someone bound by the empire's laws. He looked ancient. Older than the stones beneath their feet. Older than her bloodline perhaps. A man tied to things she had never been taught but had always felt tugging at her soul: wildness, moonlight, instinct. A shiver crawled up her spine. The silver flame pulsed again, softer this time, as if responding to him. She hated that. She hated the pull. She hated the way her body recognized a truth her mind refused to acknowledge. She didn't want connection. Connection left scars. And yet, the way he walked ahead of her, every muscle prepared to intercept danger before it reached her. That ignited something fragile and frightening inside her. Something she didn't have a name for. He stopped suddenly at an archway leading into a darker passage. Then he finally faced her fully, his expression unreadable but not unfeeling. "You're remembering," he said quietly. She clenched her jaw. She didn't want him knowing anything, even the obvious. But he did. He knew too much already. Her voice didn't come. The truth was lodged beneath years of silence. But the rain did the speaking for her, falling harder now, hitting the stone like a heartbeat against a ribcage. She didn't speak, but her eyes did. And he seemed to understand the language of fear better than most. He took a slow breath, as if steadying himself. "They called you cursed because they were afraid of what they didn't understand." She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever said that aloud. Not once. Not in 12 years of exile. Not in the pits. Not in the markets. Not in her nightmares. He continued, his tone low, roughened with something like restraint. "You carry a power older than their empire. Older than their priests. You were never meant to live small." Her throat tightened. His words felt dangerous, like a blade pressed against her pulse, sharp enough to cut, sharp enough to free. But she couldn't let herself believe them. "Don't," she whispered, the words shaking out of her like something wounded. "Don't pretend you know me." He didn't flinch. "I don't pretend anything." Silence spread between them, rain, breath, tremors of distant footsteps. Then he added, almost reluctantly, "I came because I felt your power before I ever heard your name. Because the world has been waiting for you to rise, even if you haven't." Her heart slammed so hard she felt dizzy. She didn't want destiny. She wanted a life. But life had never wanted her. He stepped aside, leaving the archway open. A small gesture. A simple one. But to her, it felt like an invitation she had never received before. Not to follow. But to choose. And for the first time in years, she hesitated not out of fear, but out of possibility. The silver flame stirred beneath her skin, quiet, curious. And she stepped forward. The moment she crossed beneath the archway, the world changed. She felt it first as a prickle along her spine, subtle, electric, instinctive. The air grew colder. The rain softened into mist that clung to her skin like breath. And the quiet became something deeper than silence. It felt intentional, as though the night itself were holding its breath. The Alpha led her through winding paths that sloped gradually downward until the stone walls gave way to open fields. She had spent most of her life confined, cages, pits, chains, crowded markets, so the sudden expanse of space stretched her nerves thin. Too much room. Too much openness. Too easy to be seen. Too easy to be hunted. She wrapped her arms around herself out of instinct. He noticed. He adjusted his pace. Just slightly. Enough for her to walk beside him rather than behind. The gesture unsettled her more than the wind. They reached the outskirts of Roman territory without confrontation, no guards, no patrols, no echo of sandals marching the roads. The darkness beyond the border was thicker somehow, the kind of darkness that felt alive. Trees rose in jagged silhouettes, their branches clawing at the sky. She had never been this far from civilization, and something primal inside her stirred at the sight. The forest, she whispered, though she didn't know why her voice lowered. He nodded. The old woods. Sacred land long before Rome carved its name on maps. The wind carried the scent of earth, rich, ancient, untouched. It filled her lungs with something sharp and clean, something that made her pulse stumble in recognition. Recognition she didn't understand. The Alpha stepped forward, and the forest opened for him, not physically, not magically, but in the way wild spaces sometimes responded to beings who belonged to them. He walked as though the trees were old friends. She followed because her feet moved before she could command them not to. The canopy swallowed them quickly, cutting off the remnants of moonlight. Shadows glided across her skin, cool and familiar. Leaves murmured overhead. Roots curled like sleeping serpents beneath the soil. And somewhere deeper in the forest, she sensed something waiting, something vast, something ancient, something that reacted to her presence with slow awakening. The path narrowed until it felt like the trees were testing her, judging her worth with their creaking limbs. The Alpha didn't falter. He looked as if he had walked this trail 100 times, maybe 1,000. He didn't turn back, didn't explain, didn't coax. He simply trusted she would follow. And she hated that she did. Yet she couldn't deny the truth humming in her bones. The forest felt more familiar than any place she had ever lived. As if her blood recognized its soil. As if this land had whispered stories she used to know but had forgotten with time and trauma. After what felt like both an hour and a heartbeat, the trees parted. The shrine revealed itself like a memory resurfacing from deep water. Massive stone wolf statues rose on each side of the clearing. Towering, crumbling, carved with precision that defied time. Moss clung to their jaws. Vines wrapped around their paws. Their eyes, though unlit, radiated a presence that rattled her chest. They weren't decorative. They weren't symbolic. They were guardians. She stopped walking. Her lungs forgot how to breathe. The air around her shimmered faintly, as though the entire clearing had been waiting for her arrival. The Alpha turned to face her, his expression unreadable but heavy with something almost reverent. "This place chooses who may enter," he said softly. "It does not open for Romans. It does not open for the unworthy." She swallowed hard, staring up at the stone wolves whose gaze seemed to pierce straight through her. "Why does it open for me?" she whispered. He didn't smile. His voice dropped lower, threaded with weight. "Because you are not what they told you were." Her hands trembled. She curled them into fists to hide it. But the silver flame responded anyway, faint light glowing beneath her skin like veins filled with molten star fire. She stepped into the clearing on unsteady legs. Each footfall felt heavier than the last. Not burdensome, significant. As if every inch of this land was remembering her even if she could not remember it. The shrine itself stood at the center. A circular stone platform half swallowed by the earth, its edges engraved with runes she didn't recognize but felt deep in her marrow. Symbols curved in spirals around wolf motifs, flames, moons, and claw marks. The stone pulsed faintly, a heartbeat she could almost hear, slow, ancient, patient. The Alpha waited, watching her take it all in. His gold eyes seemed to glow brighter here, as if the shrine's energy fed his very presence. She approached the platform cautiously, her breath shallow, her heartbeat frantic. "What is this place?" she asked. "A sanctuary," he said. "A place built by the old clans, long before the empire rose. A place where truth sleeps beneath stone and time." She looked at the carvings again, at the wolves engraved in positions of both protection and rage. "It feels alive," she murmured. "It is," he said simply. A shiver rippled through her. Fear, awe, recognition merging into one overwhelming sensation. She stepped onto the platform, and the air shifted instantly. The ground beneath her vibrated, almost imperceptibly at first, then stronger, a pulse that matched her own heartbeat until she couldn't tell which belonged to her and which belonged to the land. Light flickered beneath her feet. At first she thought it was the silver flame escaping her control again, but this light didn't come from her. It came from the stone itself, patterns awakening in soft radiance beneath years of dirt. The carvings sparked with thin lines of silver tracing ancient pathways. She gasped and stumbled backward. The Alpha moved then, catching her arm before she fell. His grip was firm but careful, carrying the kind of restraint that carved itself into her mind. He steadied her, but his eyes were locked on the glowing runes. "It recognizes you," he murmured. "Stop saying that," she choked out. "You don't know what I am." "I do," he replied, his voice quiet but unstoppable. She shook her head violently, tears stinging her eyes. "No. You don't. I'm nothing. I'm a slave. A criminal. A mistake. A curse." Her voice cracked on the last word, splintering like brittle bone. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in something like heartbreak. "You were never cursed," he said. "They lied to you." She pulled her arm away, stumbling a few steps before he let his hand fall to his side. She turned from him, staring at the ancient symbols burning across the stone. The carvings twisted into clearer shapes now, wolves in battle, flames rising between them. The silver flame. She recognized it instinctively, even though she'd never been taught its meaning. Then she saw something that made her knees weaken. A figure carved at the center of the mural. A girl. Hair wild, arms outstretched, silver light bursting from her palms like streams of moonlit fire. Wolves encircled her, bowed in allegiance. Opposite her stood another figure, a dark Alpha with eyes carved into hollow pits and fangs etched in stone. Between them, a single line of ancient text glowed with eerie silver. "The one with the silver flame will rise when shadow seeks to devour the world." Her breath froze. The Alpha stepped beside her, his voice low and reverent. This prophecy was older than the empire when the first Roman brick was laid. It speaks of a child born with silver in her blood. A child who would carry the flame strong enough to challenge the darkest Alpha in history. She stared at the carving of the girl, her stance, her light, her power, and her stomach twisted. "That's not me," she whispered. "It can't be me." "It is," he said. His certainty struck her harder than any chain ever had. She shook her head, stepping back until she hit the stone statue behind her. "No. I am not chosen. I am not powerful. I am not some savior." Her voice trembled. "I'm the girl they chained. The girl they mocked. The girl they dragged across villages because they were afraid of what I could become. And they were right to fear it," he said quietly. "Because what you could become is more powerful than anything they could control." Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, not from weakness, but from the weight of years pressing down at once. Destiny felt too heavy, too painful, too impossible. She slid down the side of the statue, her knees folding beneath her. The cold stone pressed into her back as she covered her face with shaking hands. I don't want this, she whispered. I never asked for this. He crouched in front of her, not touching, only existing in her space with a presence that steadied the air. Destiny doesn't ask, he said. But it does wait. And it has waited for you a very long time. She sobbed once, soft, raw, unguarded. The silver flame flickered beneath her skin, reacting not to danger or rage, but to truth. She hated it. She needed it. She didn't understand it. Her voice cracked open with fear. What if I fail? He held her gaze. Then I will fall with you. Something shattered inside her at those words, something she had been holding together with frayed threads. No one had ever stood with her. No one had ever promised loyalty without wanting something in return. No one had ever believed she was anything more than a burden. But he did. And that terrified her more than any prophecy could. Her breath trembled as she looked at the carvings again. The girl of prophecy wasn't bound. She wasn't broken. She wasn't kneeling on a dusty market floor waiting for someone to buy or kill her. She was standing. Radiant. Powerful. Chosen. A version of herself she couldn't imagine becoming. The Alpha rose slowly, extending a hand, not to force, not to guide, but to offer. You don't have to believe it today, he said. You only have to stand. She stared at his hand for a long moment. Then she pushed herself up using the stone behind her instead. She wasn't ready to take his hand. Not yet. But she wasn't staying on the ground either. The forest stirred around them as if approving. The shrine's glow softened. But the prophecy remained carved in light, waiting. Waiting for her. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, breath still uneven. If I really am the girl in that carving, she whispered, what does the prophecy mean for me? The Alpha's expression darkened, not ominously, but truthfully. It means the darkest Alpha in history is rising again, he said. And when he does, he will come for you. Her heartbeat faltered. The forest wind howled. The silver flame pulsed once, bright and hot, as though bracing itself for war. And deep in her chest, buried beneath fear and doubt, something ancient stirred. Something awakening. The clearing that had moments ago seemed sacred now reeked of tension. Shadows moved like living things, curling around the trees as voices pierced the mist. They weren't alone. Not anymore. From the tree-line, figures emerged. Wolves in human forms, warriors cloaked in fur and steel, faces twisted with fear, anger, and disbelief. Some bore the insignia of his pack, dissenters who had never accepted him, never trusted him. Others came from beyond the borders, soldiers trained to hunt what they didn't understand, the so-called supernatural criminals the Empire whispered about in their marketplaces. Her pulse spiked, muscles coiling with terror and adrenaline. She took an instinctive step back, but the Alpha remained before her, stance wide, eyes sharp, ready. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The air itself seemed to hum with the power of anticipation. Silver-blooded, a voice bellowed, sharp and cruel. They say she carries fire in her veins. She's a weapon. A monster. She flinched, the words cutting into her as deeply as the lashes and chains ever had. The silver flame pulsed beneath her skin, a warning she barely restrained. She could not lose control, not here, not now. If she did, they would kill her without hesitation. The first attacker lunged, a blur of movement that should have been impossible for a human. The Alpha shifted, muscles coiling, and with a swift motion, intercepted the strike. There was a clash of metal and claw, a sound that made her stomach twist. Sparks flew as talons scraped against reinforced armor, and the first wolf of the dissenting pack fell back with a howl of fury. Her breath caught, and she felt the old fear creep up, the fear of being hunted, of being taken and sold again, of being told she was a curse. She wanted to run, but instinct rooted her to the stone floor. The forest seemed alive, whispering to her, urging her to fight, to awaken the power she had always been told to suppress. A second figure moved with blinding speed, tackling the Alpha. He shifted fully, fur bristling, eyes glowing gold in the dim torchlight that had been set along the shrine steps. Claws slashed through the mist, catching stone and flesh with unrelenting force. She had never seen anything like it, the power, the sheer wildness of it. Wolves erupted in forms both human and beast, all circling, snapping, striking. She wanted to look away. She wanted to close her eyes and pretend she wasn't part of this. But something inside her ached. Something raw, desperate, defiant. Her fingers tingled, the silver flame beneath her skin itching to ignite. She felt it calling out to her, daring her, warning her. One of the rival alphas entered the clearing, massive and cruel, armored and armed, the aura of command radiating off him. His warriors fanned out, encircling them. "The girl," he roared, voice cutting through the chaos. "She is ours to claim. The prophecy is hers, and ours to bend." Her knees trembled. Her heart raced. The alpha stepped in front of her, jaw tight, eyes blazing. "No," he said, low and steady. "She is not yours." The word snapped through the air like steel. And then the world erupted. Claws met claws. Teeth flashed. Sparks of forbidden energy sparked as she involuntarily let a pulse of her silver flame brush her fingertips against the air, scorching just enough to make her attackers hesitate. The alpha moved beside her, faster than she had ever imagined, intercepting blows, countering strikes, shifting forms seamlessly between human precision and wolf savagery. She watched, frozen for a heartbeat, as the world became chaos, wolves clashing under torchlight, shouts cutting through the mist, the scent of wet earth and fear mingling into a bitter perfume. Some of the alpha's own pack were here, questioning, accusing, striking, retreating. Others shouted that she was the legendary destroyer foretold, that her bloodline would bring doom. The fear in their voices wrapped around her chest, suffocating, maddening, unbearable. The alpha roared, a sound that carried above all, and the dissenters faltered, just enough. In that moment, she realized that even in this storm of violence, he was her anchor, the only thing she could trust. But then someone struck at her from the shadows. She barely caught the movement, barely twisted out of the way. The silver flame flared in response, brushing her enemy with searing light, forcing them back. She gasped. The power had been dormant, hidden. Now it surged in brief, uncontrollable pulses. She tried to still it, tried to force it down, but her body betrayed her. She was more dangerous than she had ever allowed herself to admit, and now everyone around her knew it. A soldier screamed, pointing at her. "It's her. The destroyer of clans. She is the one the prophecy warns about." The words ripped through her, shame and fear colliding with power she could not deny. She wanted to shrink away, to vanish into the mist, to pretend she was nothing. But she couldn't. The alpha's hand brushed against her shoulder, grounding her, steadying her. His gold eyes met hers, and in that gaze, she found the tiniest fragment of courage. He didn't hesitate. He attacked with the precision of a predator born to command. Wolves collided, claws slashing, teeth snapping, shadows twisting. The world became a blur of motion. She could hear bones cracking under fur, hear the growls of rage and desperation, hear the hiss of her own breath mixing with the stormy air. And in the middle of it, the alpha never let go of her presence. He didn't ask her to fight. He didn't ask her to run. He simply existed as a wall, a shield, a force of nature she could cling to even as the world exploded around them. But the chaos wasn't just physical. Voices rose above the combat, accusations, cries of fear, whispers of prophecy. "She's the one the elders warned us about. She will destroy the pack. You cannot protect her." Her stomach churned. Her mind screamed. They were right. She would destroy them. She had been raised to be feared. Her lineage demanded destruction, even if she wished otherwise. "Leave," one of the dissenters yelled at her through the fray, teeth bared, claws extended. "This is not your place. You are not welcome here." Her chest tightened. The alpha growled low, warning, protective, but he didn't argue. His eyes flicked to the others, calculating, weighing, commanding, and still, he didn't step away from her side. She realized with sudden clarity that staying was no longer an option. Not if she wanted to survive. Not if she wanted to control what she was. The forest cleared partially, and the distant call of wolves beyond the shrine reached her ears. Somewhere else, far from this chaos, the world waited. And maybe, just maybe, she could survive it. Alone, if she had to. She tore her gaze from the Alpha for a heartbeat, only long enough to see a chain of dissenters falling back, stunned by the flare of her silver flame, terrified by the raw, untrained power that should have destroyed her entirely but instead forced a momentary pause in the onslaught. Her chest heaved. Rain-slicked hair clung to her face. Blood and mud streaked her arms, her legs, her face. The taste of fear and anger and adrenaline coated her tongue. She had never felt so alive, or so alone. The Alpha's voice cut through the chaos, low but urgent. Go. Now. I will handle them. Survive. She wanted to fight. She wanted to stay. She wanted to throw herself into the fury and claw her way through, side by side with him. But the truth was raw and impossible, he was right. Protecting him, protecting herself, would require running. At least for now. Her legs moved before her mind could process. She sprinted, barefoot and bleeding, through the mist and the forest that had once felt like sanctuary. Behind her, the sound of the clash, the roars, the snapping, the growls, followed. But she didn't look back. She could not. Every step burned in her chest. Every breath rattled in her throat. Every heartbeat screamed, I am alone. I am cursed. I must face this alone. The silver flame pulsed faintly beneath her skin as if mourning the chaos it had caused. Her mind raced with images of the prophecy, the carvings, the Alpha's steady presence beside her. And yet, the only thing she could trust now was the pounding of her own heart and the flight of her own feet. Tears mixed with rain, and she ran harder. The world was against her. The pack was against her. The prophecy was against her. Even the Alpha, he would not follow her. He could not. His throne, his position, his pack, they all demanded a choice. And she, bloodied and terrified and trembling with newfound power she barely controlled, realized for the first time what it truly meant to be exiled. To face destiny alone. The storm had passed. Where moments ago the forest had screamed with rain and chaos, now there was only silence, heavy and intimate, broken by the occasional drip of water from moss-laden branches. The mist hovered low, curling around tree trunks like pale fingers, and the moonlight spilled in through the gaps, painting the forest floor in shades of silver and gray. She crouched in a narrow cave, knees drawn to her chest, shivering, not from cold but from exhaustion, from adrenaline still thundering through her veins, from the weight of everything she'd witnessed. Her hair stuck to her wet cheeks, streaked with mud, blood, and rain. The silver flame under her skin pulsed faintly, responding to her emotional turmoil, but she forced it down, concentrating on nothing but her rapid breathing. She had run, she had survived, but she was hollow with fear, hollow with loneliness, and hollow with shame. She heard him before she saw him. The soft crunch of stone and fallen leaves, careful, deliberate, unhurried. Her muscles tensed, ready to flee again, ready to fight again. But this time, there were no howls, no claws, no shouting. Just him, his presence like a gravitational pull she didn't know she could resist. Don't move, he said softly, and it wasn't a command. It was a plea, a threat of trust offered without conditions. I'm not here to hurt you. She flinched at the sound of her name on his lips. No one had said it aloud in years, not since her village had branded her a curse. The sound felt foreign, intimate, and piercing all at once. Her throat tightened. She wanted to run, to curl into herself and vanish, but she couldn't. He crouched down beside her, careful to keep space, careful to show patience, careful to radiate calm instead of dominance. Moonlight caught the edges of his fur armor, glinting gold at the seams, silver at the edges, and she caught herself staring. Not out of lust, but because he existed in a world of rules and instincts she had never learned to navigate, and yet here he was, choosing her, defying every expectation, choosing her. Slowly, he reached for the makeshift bandages on her arms, the remnants of wet cloth she had pressed over bleeding scratches. She jerked back instinctively. Don't touch me," she whispered, voice trembling. I'll burn you." "I don't care," he said simply, unwavering. "I see you. All of you. And nothing about you scares me." She wanted to tell him he was lying, that no one could survive the burn of her power, that anyone who touched her would be marked, would be destroyed. But as he lifted her chin with rough-fingered gentleness, his thumb brushing against the dirt and blood on her cheek, her defenses faltered. Her breath hitched. "I've lost too much," he confessed quietly, voice low enough that the cave seemed to swallow it whole. "Exile from my homeland, my brother. I've wandered for years, searching for something I didn't understand. Until now." Her gaze flicked up, startled by the vulnerability in his gold eyes. He had seemed invincible, a predator unmatched, yet there was a fracture there, a weight he carried silently. She understood that weight. She knew it. She had carried her own burden since the moment she'd first burned uncontrollably at 12, since the villagers had screamed that she was cursed, since chains had become her cradle and her coffin. "I'm afraid," she admitted, voice cracking, the confession spilling out like a stream that had been dammed for years. "I've always been afraid that anyone who touches me will burn. That anyone who comes close will be destroyed by what I am." He leaned closer, careful not to pressure, careful not to overwhelm. "I'm not afraid," he murmured. "And I will not let you be alone in this." Her pulse fluttered, a mix of fear and something she didn't want to name. She had never felt anyone choose her, not fully, not without fear or expectation or need. And yet here he was, choosing her. Moonlight pooled over them, silver on her skin, silver on his face, silver in the space between them. The forest was silent but for the distant drip of water and the faint whisper of wind. Her chest rose and fell with the unsteady rhythm of uncertainty, desire, and relief all tangled together. He began to tend her wounds with deliberate care, the cloth pressed to her scratches, the soft touch of his hands paradoxically comforting and electric. She flinched once, then again, but he didn't push, didn't recoil, didn't question. He simply waited for her to decide that she would allow it, that she would allow him. "You're stronger than you know," he said softly, not as flattery, not as comfort, but as truth. His hands moved with precision, smoothing the cloth over abrasions. "The prophecy, it doesn't scare me. It doesn't define you. It doesn't bind you to fear. It's a map, a guide. But you decide your path." Her eyes widened. She wanted to argue, to protest, to tell him that her path had always been dictated by chains and fear and exile. But something in his words, in the way his gaze held hers, something in the unflinching certainty of his presence, made her pause. "I've been hunted my entire life," she whispered. "By Romans, by my village, by my own blood. And now, even by destiny." He didn't recoil. He didn't judge. He didn't falter. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, bridging the gap of distance she had insisted on keeping. His voice was almost a growl, low and intimate, meant for her alone. "Then let me stand with you. Let me fight with you. Let me be the one who does not fear what you are." Her chest tightened. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the silver flame pulsing faintly, responsive to both fear and something else, something like longing. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze for a heartbeat, afraid that if she did, she would melt, unravel, and give in entirely. And yet she couldn't look away for long. His eyes found hers again, gold and unwavering, filled with an unspoken promise that even the chaos of prophecy, even the rage of the world, even the fire in her veins, he would not falter. He would not leave. A moment stretched between them, taut and electric. She could feel her own heartbeat echoing in the quiet cave. She could feel his breath, even in the distance he gave her, steady, controlled, predator and protector intertwined. He lifted his hand slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Her skin tingled where he touched, not with pain, but with something sharp, intense, magnetic. Her own hands itched to reach for him, to close the distance, to trust him fully for the first time in her life. "I see you," he whispered again, almost reverently. "All of you. And nothing about you scares me." Her throat tightened. Her lips parted. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. She wanted to say something, anything, but words failed her. Her body betrayed her, leaning ever so slightly toward him, drawn by the gravity of his presence. The tension built, thick and unrelenting. Every second stretched, drawn out, suspended. And for a heartbeat, suspended between fear and trust, between survival and surrender, they existed only in the cave, only in each other. Then something shifted in the shadows outside the cave. A rustle of leaves, faint but deliberate. The hairs on her neck rose. The alpha stiffened, eyes snapping to the darkness, muscles coiling with instinctive readiness. The moment, their fragile, precious moment, shattered. "Not yet," he murmured, almost to himself, almost a warning, as he positioned himself between her and whatever unseen presence lurked beyond. Her heartbeat quickened, the silver flame flickering in response. She realized, in that instant, that even here, even in a sanctuary of moonlight and cave walls, the world would not allow her a moment of peace. Danger was relentless. The prophecy was relentless. And the Alpha, he was relentless in his promise to protect her. And she, for the first time, allowed herself to believe, if only a fraction, that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in the fight that lay ahead. The forest waited. The shadows waited. And somewhere in the darkness, the next threat stirred, watching, calculating, patient. But for now, in the silver moonlight, in the quiet of the cave, they stood together. Not as predator and prey. Not as hunted and hunter. But as two souls, broken and fierce, tethered by fate, by fire, by something far older than either of them, bracing for the storm yet to come. And in that shared breath, in that shared silence, the impossible spark of trust, and something dangerously close to desire, ignited between them. The first sign of betrayal came as whispers, low and malicious, drifting through the council chamber of the Alpha's stronghold. The room, carved from black stone and lit by flickering torches, smelled of sweat and unease. She had thought, even for a fleeting moment in the cave, that she could find a sanctuary. That illusion shattered in a heartbeat. A commotion at the entrance drew every eye. Torches flared higher as armored Romans pushed forward, dragging her roughly, hands bound, her silver-streaked hair plastered to her bloodied cheeks. The scent of wet stone, rain, and iron filled her nostrils. Her pulse thundered, not in fear, not this time, but in disbelief, in rage, in betrayal. "Bring her here," a voice barked. Harsh, calculated, polished in the cadence of authority. A senator, Roman-trained and cruelly satisfied, stepped forward with his hunters in tow. She is no longer a secret. Chains clinked as they forced her to stand before the packed council. The Alpha's people, those she had thought allies, those she had dared to trust, were staring. Shock, horror, uncertainty, and finally, the unmistakable glint of fear in their eyes. "She is cursed," one of the councilmen hissed, stepping forward with a finger pointing directly at her. "A danger to us all. Her blood, it burns. Her power, it will consume every wolf who stands beside her. The prophecy, it is a warning, not a gift." The words were daggers. Her breath caught. Her chest constricted. Every step she had taken, every hardship she had endured, every moment of trust she had allowed herself, all of it seemed to crash down in an avalanche of accusation. She wanted to scream. She wanted to lash out. She wanted to turn the sky into fire and make them all pay for daring to doubt her. And then she saw it. The look in the Alpha's eyes. Not betrayal. Not rejection. Fear. He hesitated, frozen for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, torn between protecting her and protecting his people. But she couldn't see the nuance. She couldn't see the weight of leadership pressing down on him, the calculation of survival against love. All she saw was doubt. And doubt shattered her. "No," she whispered, barely audible, clutching her chest as if it could contain the heartbreak that surged within her. You don't believe in me." The senator smirked, savoring the moment, sensing weakness. "Even your alpha fears what you are. Even he knows he cannot control what burns inside you." That was the spark. The match struck in tinder. Rage, betrayal, grief, it all fused inside her, igniting the silver flame that had lived dormant too long, waiting for her consent, waiting for the moment when she could no longer be subdued. She drew a deep breath, and the fire answered. It began as a pulse beneath her skin, silver and molten, creeping up her arms, trailing along her fingers. The chains clinked and rattled, reacting to the energy that hummed through the stone floor. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflections of the flame that had been whispered about in legend. "No," she screamed, voice raw and echoing. The sound was not just a plea, it was a declaration. The flame leapt, coiling around her, brushing the stone walls, scorching the air with its brilliance. The ground trembled beneath her feet. Torches exploded, white fire spilling into the air, casting shadows that danced like specters on the walls. The council recoiled. The hunters fell back. Even the Alpha's pack, frozen in disbelief, couldn't deny the power radiating from her. And yet, in the midst of the chaos, the one she had considered closest, the warrior she had trained alongside, the one who had laughed and bled with her, stepped forward. The betrayal was quiet, almost intimate, a dagger wrapped in a handshake, a nod toward the senator, an invitation for her capture, a confirmation that he would sacrifice her to save the pack from impending war. Her world fractured. Not only had the Romans betrayed her, not only had the council condemned her, but one she had trusted, one she had allowed to enter her fragile heart, had chosen the side of fear over loyalty. Her throat burned with screams she refused to release, so they became molten energy, flickering and whipping through the chamber. Silver flames licked at the stone floor, leaving faint cracks that spread like the fracture lines of her own soul. Walls groaned as if mourning the betrayal. The air burned, shimmering with the intensity of power she had never fully unleashed before. And then she ran. Not because she was afraid, though fear still lingered. But because her heart had shattered, scattering into pieces too sharp to remain where she had stood. She sprinted, barefoot over stone and rubble, silver fire radiating from her skin, illuminating the chamber and the forest beyond like a meteor streaking through night. Every step left a mark, a footprint burning faintly with the heat of her essence. Behind her, the Alpha hesitated. His hands clenched into fists. His chest rose and fell with deep, controlled breaths. He wanted to reach her, to stop her, to tell her that she was more than the judgment of the council, more than the lies spun by Romans and traitors alike. But the council's eyes were on him, the pack's murmurs pressing like weight, and his duty, his responsibility, anchored him in place. She didn't look back. Couldn't. The betrayal had burned too deep. Even the memory of his golden eyes, filled with concern and regret, couldn't anchor her anymore. Her flames pulsed, responding to heartbreak and fury alike, and she let herself run, letting the raw energy of her lineage surge freely, untethered by fear, untethered by restraint. The cave of the forest opened before her, moonlight dancing across her glowing form. She could feel the earth respond, cracks forming where her feet struck, trees shivering as if in awe, as if the forest itself recognized the uncontainable power now unleashed. Her breaths came in jagged gasps, her arms raised instinctively to control the flames that raced along her skin. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out, only the radiant, incandescent fire of the silver flame projecting outward, illuminating the darkened forest with otherworldly brilliance. She was alone. No protector, no ally, no trust remained in the chamber behind her. Even the Alpha's hesitation had cut her deeper than any physical blow ever could. She had survived Roman cruelty, packs of dissenters, and the judgment of the world. But this betrayal, this she could not survive quietly. And as the forest trembled around her, As the torches collapsed into sparks and smoke behind her, she made a decision. She would not be a victim. She would not be a pawn. She would not run forever. Not this time. The silver flame surged in her chest, coursing through every vein, every sinew, every fractured piece of her spirit. The betrayal had not weakened her, it had set her ablaze. Every heartbeat became thunder. Every step became defiance. Every breath became a promise. They would know her power, they would feel her wrath, they would see the girl they had condemned, the girl they had betrayed, and they would never forget her. She ran into the night, the wind whipping her hair, the fire painting her skin in stark silver, illuminating the forest path with blinding brilliance. Behind her, the echoes of the betrayal lingered, sharp and unrelenting, but ahead, something else waited. Something uncharted. Something that whispered to her, not with chains or condemnation, but with the possibility of reclaiming herself. And in the heart of that fire, in the core of that devastation, she realized she had finally become unstoppable. The forest trembled before she even set foot on it. The wind had turned sharp, carrying the acrid scent of smoke, iron, and fear. Rain, once gentle, now lashed violently across the battlefield, hissing as it hit the silver flames dancing around her skin. The sacred lands, once silent and protective, now roared with anticipation. Every leaf, every stone, every shadow seemed to recognize her, calling her forth as if the earth itself had been waiting for this moment. From the horizon came the thunder of hooves, the clash of armor, the organized brutality of trained hunters and rival wolves who had come to seize, to destroy, or to claim her power. The rival alpha led them, towering and cruel, his form shifting subtly in anticipation, eyes glinting with a predator's arrogance, teeth bared in cruel anticipation. The Romans, soldiers of empire, had formed tight ranks, spears glinting in the intermittent flashes of lightning, eager to claim the girl who had been whispered about as the silver-blooded weapon. But she did not flee. Not this time. Not after betrayal. Not after the fire of loss and heartbreak had forged her anew. She stood in the middle of the sacred clearing, water dripping from her hair, mud streaked across her cheeks, silver fire spiraling around her body like a living storm. Each pulse of her heartbeat sent waves of energy radiating outward, making the leaves quiver, making the ground hum beneath her feet. A hush fell over the assembled pack and soldiers. Even the rival alpha hesitated, sensing the unnatural intensity of her presence. The silver flame had awakened fully, and it was more than fire. It was history, lineage, and vengeance all woven together, an unstoppable force that did not beg for mercy. Her lungs drew in the storm-laden air, and as she exhaled, her form began to shift. First shimmered into existence, white and silver, intertwining with the flames that wrapped around her limbs. Her eyes glowed gold, twin suns burning through shadow. Her voice, when she spoke, resonated across the clearing, amplified by the voice of her ancestors, echoing in every stone and tree. "I am not your weapon," she roared, the words carrying a weight that made the forest itself shiver. "I am not your curse. I am not your sacrifice." The earth responded. Cracks split open, revealing roots like veins glowing faintly with silver light. Ancient wolf statues, forgotten by time and buried beneath centuries of soil, groaned as they awakened, their eyes igniting with spectral fire. The ruins of temples and shrines vibrated with life as if recognizing the heir to the silver flame, the child of prophecy who had been denied, hunted, and betrayed, now claiming her destiny with every fiber of her being. The rival alpha lunged, attempting to intimidate, to assert dominance, but she did not flinch. Her limbs blurred as the fire coiled around her like living serpents, deflecting every strike, every thrust. The clash of claws and steel against silver flame created sparks that danced across the stormy night, illuminating her figure as a deity made flesh, part wolf, part fire, part uncontainable force. Romans shouted commands, spears thrust, but their formations faltered in awe and fear. Wolves hesitated, torn between instinct and terror, sensing the raw, primal authority that pulsed from her. Every heartbeat she exhaled was a pulse of power that resonated through the land, bending nature to her will. The wind howled, whipping her hair around her face, carrying her voice far beyond the clearing, announcing that she had arrived fully, without fear, without doubt. She remembered the betrayal, the council, the warrior, the senator, and that memory coiled around her like molten steel, sharpening her senses, sharpening her intent. She would not forgive, not yet. She would not yield, not now. Every motion of her body was precise, controlled, yet wild, as though the very essence of the silver flame had merged with the instincts of the wolf within her. And then she heard him, the alpha she had trusted, the one who had stood beside her in quiet moments, who had whispered that he saw all of her. He was at the edge of the battlefield, torn between following his pack's orders and protecting her. Their eyes met across the chaos, and for a heartbeat, every fire, every motion, every threat fell away. She was reminded why she had survived, why she had endured, why she had returned to claim what was hers. Lightning struck, illuminating the clearing in stark white. She exhaled, and the flames around her erupted into a vortex of silver and gold, coiling upward like a living storm. The rival alpha staggered, unprepared for the sheer magnitude of her power, and for the first time, fear touched him. "Step aside," she commanded, voice low, resonant, carrying both wrath and authority. "You face not a girl. You face the culmination of centuries, the fire of ancestors, and I will not be contained." The ground beneath the Roman soldiers quaked. Spears fell from trembling hands. Wolves stumbled, unsteady on the suddenly unstable earth. Every motion of her body sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The ancient ruins of the shrine shook violently. Statues split along their carved seams, eyes glowing, mouths opening in silent howls that echoed across the clearing. Her transformation was complete. Part wolf, lithe and powerful, with claws and fangs designed for survival and dominance. Part flame, burning white and silver, illuminating her every movement with unnatural brilliance. Part goddess, untouchable and commanding, resonating with the whispers and roars of ancestors long dead but never forgotten. She inhaled deeply, sensing the true villain, the darkest wolf ever born in Roman times, a predator who had manipulated, killed, and twisted his way into power. He emerged from the shadows, his form larger, darker, his eyes reflecting malice and centuries of cruelty. He had underestimated her before, but now he saw fully, painfully, that the girl they had branded as cursed had become something far beyond fear, far beyond prophecy. They had created a force that could not be ignored. She growled, low and resonant, the sound carrying the weight of every betrayal, every loss, every moment of despair that had led her here. Fire coiled around her limbs, eyes glowing, fur bristling, the storm above answering with thunder. The battlefield became a living entity under her command, the wind bending, the rain scattering, the earth trembling, as if nature itself recognized the power now fully claimed. And in that instant, she knew, she would not run. She would not hide. She would face him, face the darkness that had haunted centuries, and reclaim not just herself, but the very future of the sacred lands and the legacy of the silver flame. The clash was imminent. Every wolf, every soldier, every creature on the field sensed it. Time seemed to slow, stretching with anticipation. She planted her feet firmly, claw scraping stone, fire crackling along her spine. The storm mirrored her heartbeat, lightning painting the battlefield with ephemeral light, shadows stretching, dancing. The darkest wolf stepped forward, snarling, claws gleaming, eyes locked on hers. And she did not flinch. "I am not your sacrifice," she whispered, the words carrying through the storm like an unbreakable vow. "I am the reckoning." The battlefield held its breath. And then, with a surge of silver flame and a roar that shook the heavens, she stepped fully into her power, the first move in a confrontation that would shake the world, awaken ancient forces, and redefine the boundaries between predator, prey, and the legacy of fire that coursed through her veins. The battlefield had quieted, but the silence was a fragile thing, stretched tight across shattered stone, smoldering torches, and the faint crackle of the last silver flame still clinging to her skin. Her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, each inhale carrying the weight of what had happened, and each exhale releasing the echoes of rage, grief, and defiance that still surged through her veins. She stood amidst ruins that had once been sacred, staring at the scorched ground, feeling the tremors of power she had released, the tremors of betrayal, the tremors of destiny. Every piece of her being hummed with the truth she had always known but had never dared to embrace. She was more than the world had branded her. She was more than the chains, the whispers, the fear. She was the fire, the wolf, the line of ancestors that had flowed through her veins, whispering through time, guiding her steps, demanding she claim her power. Her thoughts, usually scattered and chaotic, now focused on one searing question, a question that clawed at her heart like claws against stone. Would they have chosen her? The pack, the people, those who had turned away in fear, those who had betrayed her for survival, would they have seen beyond the fire? Would they have recognized her strength as a gift instead of a curse? Would they have chosen me, or feared me too? She whispered, voice trembling but carrying, echoing across the charred stones and broken pillars. The words were more than a question, they were a challenge, a plea, a cry from the very marrow of her being. Her golden eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, scanned the ruins, as if daring the world to answer, to admit the truth she already knew. The world feared what it could not control. Her lips curved in a half-smile, bitter and defiant, as another thought cut sharper than any blade. Am I their guardian, or just a girl cursed with too much fire? The question lingered in the damp air, carried on the cold breeze, echoing in the broken hearts and shattered spirits that had witnessed the rise of the silver flame tonight. She did not seek the answer. Not yet. Tonight, she only allowed herself to feel the weight of the question, the ache of solitude, the loneliness of being a force the world could not contain. And yet, even in that silence, there was a pull. A reminder that she was not entirely alone. The Alpha, standing a short distance away, his golden eyes reflecting both concern and admiration, did not speak. He did not need to. She could feel the bond between them, fragile yet unbroken, tethered by the trials, the battles, and the moments of quiet truth they had shared. And she realized that though the world might fear her, there was someone who did not. Someone who had seen all of her, every spark of fire, every scar, every flicker of doubt, and still chose to stand beside her. If this story has lit something deep inside your chest, she seemed to think, if it has made your heart race and your soul ache with every betrayal and triumph, then follow the flame. Let it guide you through the shadows and the light. Subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, where stories are carved from heart and myth, where power meets destiny, and where love is the fiercest battle of all. Let the fire of her journey linger in your veins, because this is only the beginning. Underscore 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 underscore. The storm had passed, leaving the forest and ruins drenched and shimmering under the pale moonlight. Mist curled along the ground, and the last remnants of her silver flames reflected like ribbons of molten light across broken stones. She and the Alpha walked side by side, each step heavy with exhaustion, each breath a quiet acknowledgement of what they had survived. The Alpha's hand brushed against hers, tentative, respectful, not demanding, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. But the shadows were patient, and the earth remembered. Beneath the soil, deep and hidden, tremors continued, subtle yet insistent, as if the world itself warned that the night's battles were only the first act. Somewhere in the darkness, a low growl resonated. Not the growl of the wolves who had fought and faltered tonight, but something older, something primal, something that had watched her rise and waited for the right moment to stir. She is not the only one, the voice rumbled through the trees, barely audible yet unmistakably present, carrying with it a threat, a promise, a warning. The words wrapped around the ruins and the trees, curling through the night like a living shadow. Or perhaps, another whisper, hushed but deliberate. The true Alpha has yet to rise. The wind shifted, carrying the echoes away, leaving the moonlight and mist as the only witnesses to what had just transpired. The ground underfoot vibrated subtly, reminding them both that the world was not yet done, that the stories of betrayal, power, and destiny were far from over. She looked at him, golden eyes meeting his, and though her voice was not yet strong enough to carry the threat or promise aloud, her silence spoke volumes. The battles had been won, yes, but the war, the true war, was only beginning. The silver flame burned brighter in her chest, a beacon for what was to come, a warning to those who would dare to underestimate her again. And as they stepped into the darkened path beyond the ruins, the camera of imagination fades to black, leaving only the trembling of the earth, the echo of a growl from the unseen, and the unmistakable feeling that everything they had witnessed, everything she had become, was merely the prelude to something far greater, far darker, and far more intoxicating than anyone could yet imagine. The night waits, the shadows linger, and the silver flame will rise again.